Yeah, let's get ready to roll.
All right, everybody.
Yes, absolutely. All right. So I'm going to just introduce myself quickly. My name is Minna Schulten, and I am a registered dietitian here in North Central Massachusetts, and I am also the Healthy Food Access Coordinator with Growing Places. Growing Places is a nonprofit organization in Leominster. We work in multiple areas to make sure our region has a flourishing and healthy food system, and so that everyone in our region has access, equitable access to fresh foods, especially locally grown produce. So we work with our whole food system. So everything from growing food to distributing that food to connecting people with local marketplaces, to connecting with farmers to develop a really robust local food economy. And we work on a systems level to create a fair and just food system in our region. And part of that work, connecting with people, we engage with environmental sustainability, gardening, farming, and nutrition and cooking, which is kind of why we are here today. So we want to make sure that food is getting to communities, but we also want to make people feel supported in knowing how to cook with these foods, right? We want to teach, and we also want to listen and help people connect with each other so we can learn from each other in community about our individual food ways. So if you haven't already, I want to actually get started with a little self-assessment. So the question is, on a scale of 1 to 5, rate your confidence and experience with cooking right now. So if you're a 1, maybe help, you haven't cooked much, but you want to learn. If you're a 2, you have some basic cooking skills. If you are 3, you have some favorite recipes and you tend to stick to those. If you're a 4, you know your way around the kitchen pretty well and you're pretty comfortable following a recipe. And if you answered a 5, like Master Chef, here you come, you can read any recipe and even improvise in your cooking skills. Nice, I see a lot of 4s, a couple 5s, 3s. Yeah, so all levels, which is awesome and to be expected. This is, no matter what you answered to this question, there's going to be something in this session for you. But if you answered anything under than a 5, I think this session will be kind of especially helpful for you.
Did it work?
Yeah, there's a poll popping up there. So if you've already answered in the chat, that's totally fine. If not, then you can go ahead and answer the poll that has popped up on the screen.
I did the thing right.
All right, I answered a 4 for myself because I'm not entering Master Chef anytime soon, but I'm pretty savvy in the kitchen. So you'll hear me say this more than once. Cooking is really empowering. Cooking is an important skill for self-care and for community care. When you nourish yourself in a way that is adaptable, flexible, enjoyable for yourself, and in a way that attends to good nutrition, you are fueling your brain and your body and really priming yourself to show up in the world as the best self that you can, right? And to share all that you have. So cooking as self-care is something that's really passionate for me. Oh, okay, so the polls may be timed and popped up just now. Okay, so they might pop up on their own, we'll see. So cooking is a set of skills, right? Anybody can learn to cook. And also, it is a set of skills that requires or is really helpful if you can be relatively organized, right? Mentally organized and physically organized in your space. The thing is, not all of us are super organized people or super linear thinkers. I'm actually not a super organized person by nature. And so if you resonate with that and that sounds like you can also learn to cook and cook successfully. You might just have to work at creating some systems and practicing your approach. So I hope I shared with you some tips about how to do that today. If you walk away from one message from this class, I want you to know that the 2 secrets to successful cooking are kind of taking the time to set yourself up for success with some organization, and also not taking it too seriously. Have fun with it. The more you cook and build confidence in cooking, the more you'll be able to sort of improvise and put your own sense of creativity and flavor into the process. So today I'm going to give you some tips to do that while we make muffin tin pancakes. I love this recipe because it is really adaptable, right? You can make it with any vegetables and fruits or flavorings that you like by changing up the spices. You can customize it and you can play with it a little bit. It's a great recipe for practicing your cooking skills because it does provide a really clear structure, and it's a pretty simple recipe to get started with. So people at all cooking levels that you identified will be able to use this and kind of apply it to their own skill level. So you always, stick to the plan, but bring some creativity to the process. Cooking takes practice, and to illustrate what I mean by the need to get a little practice before you're good at something, before it becomes second nature, I want to just do a really quick exercise with you. If you have access to a writing utensil and paper, go ahead and grab that. If you don't, you can think about this in your mind. You can use your hand and pretend this is your writing utensil and pretend that your palm is your paper, right? I want you to simply draw a house. So think about what the basic pieces are in a house, draw it out, and then maybe add some extra details. So maybe that is shutters on the windows or a chimney. If you do an apartment building, maybe it's a little striped awning or a tree beside the building. I'll give you just a second to do that, either mentally or actually on your paper. And then, think to yourself, like, how did you know how to draw a house? It was probably a pretty simple task for you. And that's because you spend a heck of a lot of time in houses. You've read countless books with pictures of houses in them. You didn't really have to do much work in order to do this exercise, most likely. You could do it easily from memory. So your brain kind of knew how to organize this task right away. And that's because you had lots of practice. So cooking is exactly the same. You just have to jump in and do it. And the more you do it, the more confident that you'll be. All right. I'm gonna do my second attempt at screen sharing here. This one should be a little easier. This is our recipe, which is also located. Oh, that's funny. My slides are here now. That's good. Okay. Okay. Whoops. One moment. Oh, goodness. There we are. Okay. All right, folks. You can all see the recipe that I have shared now?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, success. So this recipe is organized in a special way. Most recipes that you see are not going to have this section up here where it lists out the equipment that you have in advance. You'd have to scroll down here to the directions in order to be able to see that. So reading the recipe all the way through is kind of your first step toward organization. You'll see all the equipment that we have sort of listed out here. And you'll see the ingredients we have set up. And I have this recipe organized in 3 columns. Our muffin tin pancakes have a batter, and then they've got fillings. This recipe has 2 versions, a savory one made with veggies with a little cheddar cheese and some spices. I'm using smoked paprika today, and some sweet fillings, which has fruit and a little bit of a brown sugar topping. So after you have kind of read through the recipe, you want to read down the whole ingredient list. Does anybody know why the ingredients are listed in a certain order on the recipe? It's not just random, and you'll notice it's not alphabetical either. If you know the answer, you can enter it in the chat. And Lenny, if you know it, if anybody has any ideas, or you see that there's a variety of ideas.
I'm trying to expand this. There we go.
Yeah.
All right.
I see some people typing, but I can't see you all too well, so.
See, it's dry and wet ingredients.
Yeah, it's dry and wet ingredients, yeah. So the order of the ingredients as they're listed on the ingredient list is actually the order that you use them in the recipe. So our first ingredient here is whole wheat or oat flour, right? And so except for the oil that we're using to grease our muffin tins, the first ingredient that we're actually using down here is our flour. So when a recipe is written well, the ingredients are listed in terms of how the first to last ingredient that you add to the recipe. So notice in this recipe, we're using whole grain flour. Whole grain is the first ingredient, and this recipe uses half whole grain flour and half all-purpose flour or white flour. Whole grains are really super nutritious. The USDA recommends that about half of the grains that we eat are whole grain. This is a really simple illustration of what a whole grain is. So pretend my arm is a stalk of wheat, and then my fist is the wheat berry. The whole grain is this whole entire thing, including the exterior, the interior, and this little bit on the inside called the germ, and they grind it up into flour. And when that happens, you get all the nutrients, which live in the germ, and all of the fiber, which lives in the bran. When flour is refined, they take the outside off and they remove the germ. So they end up adding back some vitamins and minerals to fortify white flour a little bit, but whole grain flour is just naturally more nutritionally dense. So we're using that in this recipe. In terms of our produce, this is where the flexibility comes in. You can use all different kinds of colorful fruits and veggies. I today am using broccoli and some orange bell pepper. When you're choosing your veggies, definitely go for color, because different colored veggies are a really great indication that you're getting in a wide variety of nutrients. So different vitamins and different minerals tend to be associated with different vegetables, and that's correlated a little bit with what colors they have, especially when it comes to antioxidants. So that's a nice little, really easy nutrition tip, is making sure you're getting in your colors. That's probably something you've heard a number of times from in different areas of your life when you've talked about nutrition. So I'm gonna stop sharing real quick and want to hop back over to the Whova window here. There should be another poll. Let's see. So there's a poll that lists some types of whole grains that you've tasted. If everybody wants to jump in the polls and answer that right now, you can. If you don't want to, that's fine. I'll read them out. You can just kind of identify for yourself which ones you've had and which ones you'd like to try. Barley, buckwheat, corn, oat, quinoa, which is actually a seed, but we kind of treat it like a grain, brown rice, rye, spelt, and whole wheat. So feel free to answer in the chat if you've had any of those, or if any of those are new to you. That is totally fine. If you want to take the poll, that is fine as well. You should just be able to click on the poll and submit it. All right. Some answers in the chat. Yeah. Oh, okay. So some of you, oh, so there is, or you're not seeing the poll. Okay. Sorry about that, guys. It might come up later in the session. If not, it's totally fine. Lots of answers for whole wheat. Brown rice, have most of them, oats and whole wheat. Yeah, those are some of the more common ones. So you can experiment with different types of flours, especially in your baking. I'm gonna go ahead, I think, and start the cooking process. I'm gonna shift my camera so you can see my work area here. All right. So that's pretty good. I'll give you kind of an aerial view. So in terms of physically organizing, I have most of my ingredients laid out here, pre-measured. That's a really great tip, especially if you're just starting out, as you're just getting comfortable. You'll want to lay out and pre-measure your ingredients so that everything is kind of very accessible to you and you can use it right away. So we're gonna start with mixing our dry ingredients together in our large bowl. So these are dry measuring cups. I'm using these for my dry ingredients. And I'm using a scoop and sweep method for measuring. A lot of bakers will weigh out their ingredients, but it's not really necessary. For a recipe like this, if you're doing a really fancy cake, then you definitely are going to want to measure out. This is our all-purpose flour. How are we doing on time, Lenny?
We've got about 20 more minutes.
Okay. So this is my flour. That is all done. I'm going to get it out of the way since my space is a little bit limited. And then I've got 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder. I've got a little bit of salt. That's half a teaspoon of salt.
If any of you guys have any questions, you can feel free to either, talk live or to pop them in the chat and
Yeah,
I can let Nina
absolutely.
know.
Absolutely.
She can't actually see the chat screen while she's baking.
Yes.
Yes, you don't want to live chat and bake. You don't want to,
Right.
you don't want to text and drive, those kind of things.
Exactly. I have to step away to grab my whisk. Even with the best of intentions, there's always something in the cooking process that escapes you. So I had to go get my whisk. So these are all of our dry ingredients, and then our wet ingredients go together. So this is a really common procedure when you're baking. You'll do dry, wet, and then add them together. I got these eggs from my neighbor next door. I am lucky enough to live next door to someone who raises chickens. So these are nice farm fresh eggs, which is pretty awesome. So I'm cracking my eggs. I'm putting them right down here, straight into my compost bucket, which is under my counter. You want to make sure that you have somewhere to put your eggshells so that you're not getting any raw egg anywhere over the counter. I'm going to go wash my hands really fast. And while I'm washing my hands, you can go and enter into the chat which produce that you would use if you were making this recipe. I've got raw egg on my hands. Don't want to spread that around the kitchen. So always do this with your cracking raw eggs when you're baking.
You guys can pop in. What would you put in? Did she say what she was putting in? Is she doing blueberries?
So for today, I'm putting in strawberries for my fruity one.
Strawberries. Okay.
Yes.
I guess I just had blueberries on my brain.
Yeah, blueberries are great.
They are good.
I'm just going to beat this up just a little bit. Break up the yolk. And then I'm adding my milk. And don't worry, you have access to the recipe in a download in Whova, so you can make this at home. This is my oil. And then I'm simply going to add my liquid ingredients to my dry ingredients and mix them up. So if you've made pancakes before, this is going to be more like a pancake batter than a muffin batter. So it might be a little thinner than a muffin. So even though we're baking them in muffin tins, it's sort of consistency-wise, it's a lot more like a pancake batter. So it's a little bit thick, but it's still like a little bit runny. You can feel free to thicken it up depending on the flours that you're using. You have to use sort of more or less dry or liquid ingredients. With a recipe like this, you don't have to feel nervous about adding just a little bit more flour if you wanted to thicken it up a little bit. So the first step in the recipe, which I didn't mention out loud, super important, preheat your oven. If you remember late, that's okay. My oven is already preheated. So I'm gonna pop these in during our session and they'll finish baking a little later, but I'll show you the final product before we are out of here. So the process of putting these muffins together, this is my muffin tin. And what we want to do, this is sprayed already with a little bit of oil. What we want to do is pour a little bit of batter, a little less than halfway up each muffin tin. And this sort of just creates a base of the batter. We're going to put in our fillings, our fruit and veggie fillings, and then we're going to add a little bit more batter on top. So we're going to do 6 and 6, 6 savory and 6 sweet. So I have some really nice broccoli and some orange pepper here. So I'm going to take this and put a little handful in each muffin cup.
Did you say that's pepper?
This is orange pepper, yeah, orange bell pepper. And you'll notice like it's really beautiful color, so it adds a little bit of color to this as well as some good nutrition. Bell peppers are high in vitamin C. Mm-hmm. And I'm also going to add a little cheddar cheese to our savory side. Just a few shreds per cup there. I'm going to do my fruit. These are strawberries. This recipe works with fresh or frozen. So if you've got frozen fruit that you'd like to use, that's great. It's awesome to use local produce when peaches come into season. Here in our region, this would be super good with fresh peaches or plums. A lot of versatility, a lot of creativity. So we're going to go back to our batter and we're going to top them off. These don't rise as high as regular muffins do, so you can make these relatively full. They're not going to overflow from the muffin tins. They're going to eat more like a pancake, but they're going to look like a muffin.
Now, how come you put the ingredients like that in separate rather than like, I don't know how everybody else, when I make them, I usually just whip everything in together.
Yeah, you could. I have found when I do it this way, the fruit doesn't sink to the bottom quite as much. So if you want to, this is another, this is a method experimentation. So try it out a couple different ways and kind of see what happens.
I didn't know there was going to be like a surprise element to it.
What's that?
I didn't know if there was going to be like a surprise element to it.
No, not exactly. I just think it makes a better consistency in the muffin. So this is a spice called smoked paprika. I really love it. It adds a lot of really nice savory flavor to dishes. It's a great spice to add when you know that a savory dish needs a little something, but you don't know what it is. It also adds really pretty color on the top of our savory muffins. And then our sweet version is going to get just a little bit of brown sugar on the top. Just a little sprinkle, and that's going to help it to brown nicely and just give a little hint of sweetness. So our muffin batter doesn't really have any sugar in it whatsoever. All right. So these are ready to go in my oven. I'm going to screen share a couple more items with you all, and then I'll show you what they look like when they come out. So those will bake at 350 for 30 to 40 minutes. All right. I wanted to share with you all a couple of, resources for local agriculture here in Massachusetts. So you can take advantage of local produce and learn a little bit more about it. So, the first one, this is the Mass Grown map. This is a map of all the different farmers markets that exist in the state of Massachusetts. So that's a lot, folks.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to zoom in a little bit closer to our region. See if I can get everybody here. If you can take a look at the map and see if you can locate approximately where your hometown is, and see if there's a farmer's market sort of anywhere near you. You can use this map to get the actual address of the farmer's market and also identify which farmer's markets accept HIP, which is a really cool program that allows households using SNAP benefits to get extra money to use for fresh local produce at farmers markets.
Excuse me. Did you say you were making strawberry muffins?
Yeah, so
And you know how good they are? Do you know how good they are? They're very delicious.
Yeah, I think they're really good. I mean, you'll have to try the recipe and see how you like them.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
I cook with my family sometimes, and I try them too. And I usually help Holly with the bacon stuff, and
that's awesome.
She's my stepmother.
That's awesome.
And yeah, and it's nice to meet you.
You as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to, let's see. Let me switch tabs here. And while I'm doing this, I want you to try to all take a guess as to how many farms total there are in Massachusetts. It's quite a lot. Let's see. Stop share and navigate here. Okay, so do you think it's 500 or fewer? Between 500 and 1,000? Between 1,000 and 5,000? Or between 5,000 and 10,000? You can make your guess. I think there should be a poll with this one, or you can enter it in the chat, or just think to yourself. So this is another map. Massachusetts has 7,241 farms total, which is like an astounding number, I think. Almost 500,000 acres of farmland, of land in Massachusetts is farmland. You can see it divided up by county here. So here's big old Worcester County. Franklin County has got a lot. So this is the percentage of land in each county that's dedicated as farmland. the vast majority of those are individually or family-owned farms. And so when you are spending money on local produce, it's really a really valuable kind of investment into our community. Just do a quick time check, and I want to do one more activity with you all. About 10 minutes, is that right? All right, Lenny, that sounds good. So this is, it's actually not a real dollar. This is a fake dollar, not legal tender, folks. So when you buy something online, how much of this dollar, what percentage of this dollar do you think is retained in our local economy?
I know. I think it's $1.
Yeah, if you can keep yourselves muted, but you can answer in the chat. So here's the answer. Pretty close to zero. Maybe a little bit of that dollar, but chances are all of that dollar is leaving our local economic system. But when you buy from a local producer or a local business, about 60% or so of this dollar will stay in the local economy. And why is that? That is because farmers, local farmers, for example, are more likely to hire local folks to work on the farm. They're more likely to buy their supplies from other local businesses. And so this dollar really circulates around our community to create more economic opportunities for individuals, for families, and for us all. And so, you know, the more we can invest into creating a sustainable food system that's also accessible to everybody, not only are we sort of benefiting our land, but we're really benefiting kind of our local culture and our local economy and our well-being as a whole, as well as our health. So if you want to, you know, check out which farmers markets are near you or which local farms that are near you, I can enter these websites into the chat after the session. So if you want to navigate back here, you can find that as well. Let's see, I will, I think, end with, there we go. A couple of slides from some of the community gardens that Growing Places has worked on, just so you can get a visual for some of what kind of this looks like sort of out in the community. So this is a community garden in Clinton. This is the Fitchburg Farmers Market. Raise your hand if you've been there. I definitely have. And then this is a picture of the Growing Places mobile market. This is a mobile farmers market that we have, that we bring to different communities. So this shows up at the Fitchburg Farmers Market and other markets kind of in your area as well. So if you are interested in finding out where the mobile market is going to be, or just interested in what our food system looks like, right? These are all those pieces I was talking about at the beginning of the presentation, and how we can make this entire system more equitable, and how we can really bring nutritious food to our communities. You can visit the Growing Places booth over in the exhibition area of HUVA. We have a lot of volunteer opportunities for young folks, and everything from policy to digging in the dirt. We've got some education opportunities as well. If cooking is your thing and you'd like to participate in that, I'm sure we can have make some connections there as well. So we can, yeah, take the last few minutes. I'm going to navigate properly back to HUVA here. I can take the last few minutes for kind of any questions, or if you have any thing to share about the recipe. I'd love to know if it's something that you'd like to try.
Yeah, we get about 7 minutes left, guys, before we head out.
And I'll leave you with some takeaways, just some different options for how to engage with this information after this session as well. Let's see. Yeah, so there's a suggestion in the chat. Not sure if you can do this for muffins, but for cupcakes, if you don't want eggs, you can replace them for applesauce. Yeah, so that is a great suggestion. Fruit purees are a good egg substitute. A lot of folks are allergic to eggs. And another one is, this was a wacky one, but it works really well. The liquid from a can of beans, it's called Aquafaba, and it makes a really great egg substitute. So if you are a person who has an egg allergy or sensitivity and you want to experiment with that, it's a really great binder in a lot of baking recipes. You can also use flaxseed mixed with a little water. There's some sort of ready-made egg replacement products out there as well. So you can adapt this to your particular dietary needs. Yeah. So, some suggestions for takeaways from this session. You can practice with this recipe or another recipe that you have in mind. Pay attention to organizing yourself kind of mentally and physically, and get really comfortable in the kitchen. That confidence is going to come with practice, just like anything else. You can think about using fruits and vegetables creatively. So if you have a recipe in mind, see if you can figure out a way to squeeze an extra fruit or veggie in there, right? And think about ways to get more colorful produce in your meals and snacks. You can also find out if there's a farmer's market near you. Talk about food justice and food equity with your teachers and your peers. And of course, commit to nourishing yourselves well. So these are my pre-baked batch of muffins that I made yesterday. I want to show you what they look like when they're done. So here's my savory one with my broccoli. The paprika makes a nice color on the top. This is my strawberry one here. So,
ooh, I want muffins.
They look good, right?
They are very flat.
And there's all this yummy produce inside. You'll know they're done when a toothpick comes out clean, just like you would use any other muffin recipe. These are an awesome, on-the-go snack to fuel yourself, a great grab-and-go breakfast in the morning. So
I got about 4 minutes left, guys, for any questions.
Absolutely. Yeah, so there's a comment in the chat of being messy when you cook and sort of how hard it is sometimes to clean as you go. It can be a challenge sometimes to kind of stay physically organized in the kitchen. And so again, that takes practice, but having a good setup beforehand is going to make that a lot easier for yourselves. So if you could have your ingredients laid out, that's great. It does make a few more dishes when you pre-measure, I will say that, but it's the best way. And in the end, you're gonna end up with less cleanup if you can really set yourself up beforehand. You could only use 1 or 2 ingredients and still make a giant mess. I know, just keep at it. Any recommendations for granola? Oh, so that's a whole other, kettle of fish, but granola is a great recipe to try. It's really adaptable. It's a nice whole grain recipe. You can add nuts to it. You can mix it with dried fruit later on if you like. So I can't rattle off a recipe right now, but that would be a really excellent one to explore for sure.
Do you know any good websites where they could look up some really healthy recipes?
Yeah, so Eating Well has a lot of good ones on there. The Kitchen is a good website. I like their recipes. They're really well tested. America's Test Kitchen has some free content and they're really excellent as well. So those are 3, I think, that are worth exploring. You can keep your eye on Growing Places social media. We definitely post recipes there. So if you are on different social media channels, you can check there and see what we have going on, especially in the depths of the growing season. We'll be giving lots of ideas for how to use your bok choy and your fresh broccoli and your carrots and your fresh fruits.
Bye,
Thanks,
guys.
everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.